start. Hanging on, building up the speed in 6th gear. You don't want to drift out too wide there. You can have a very big accident, as James Nash and Tom Chilton have found out in the last couple of years. Whoa, and Thiago getting a little hot under brakes into turn 3. Gabriele Tarquini behind him. And there are some circuits on the calendar where slipstreaming your teammate is great for speed. Here, there are only 2 places where it's really going to pay off. Down towards the pits and back past the pits. And after that, the rest of the lap, you really need the aero to be working extremely well. These cars now much more dependent on aero grip than previously, despite the slightly wider Yokohama tyres. And this infield section, as you can see, watching Thiago constantly turning. Again, climbing the rise. And dropping down into another big stop. Brakes get worked very hard here. And then onto the long back straight. That's the end of timing sector 2, which is basically all the corners, except for the final one and the first one. And this is a very fast run down to the last corner. There's a lot of different ways of skinning a cat here. You can do what Thiago's done, which is turn in early, come out wide, and then take the second part as a second corner. You can hug the apex all the way around, but most will try and triangulate it a bit if they can, which means going in deeper, scrubbing off the speed more in a straight line, but deeper into the corner, then turning sharply and trying to get on the gas much earlier, much as you do with a hairpin. See the Hondas. It's the little glint there from Mehdi Banani's car, the 3rd in the queue, was off his visor. Looked like he was using an Aldis lamp to do Morse code. I believe that's probably not the case. Norbert Michelis, fastest first lap from Muller and Loeb. But they're all in the 206s. The Citroens were down in the 205s yesterday. 205.2 was the fastest lap from this man, Pechito, Jose Maria Lopez. There's Marie-Pierre, the PR woman for Citroën, stroke defensive guard for Sebastian Loeb. Pit buildings on your right-hand side. Who else is setting quick lap? Well, this is Lopez opening foray, 0.281 up in the first sector. Second sector, not as quick as his rivals. Whoa, and who went off? Up the escape road, camera, 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 no. Hello in the truck. Oh, he's coming into the pits. So Tom Chilton was in, and James Thompson was in. And somebody's still in on the pit road. That's it was Engsler we saw coming in. So Chilton and Thompson in after an out and in lap. Jose Maria Lopez goes fastest. Mark Ha, who will be racing for Citroën later in the season, here to take a look at the way the team operates. And that's a great opportunity, actually, to spend the entire weekend embedded in a team just listening. All right, a degree of it is going to be very French. However, if he's plugged into Jose Maria Lopez and his engineer, then he will be able to understand the English. Data being downloaded in James Thompson's car. Engines from Orica, just down the road in Magny-Cours from where the Lada Sport offices and workshops are. And this is our 4th race weekend in 5 weeks. And what that means is that a lot of these teams are basically living out of a suitcase still and have been on the road pretty much non-stop for the last month and a bit, month and a half almost for most of them. So not only are their wives, children and dogs starting to forget what they look like, but also, unless you've got a big manufacturing operation like Citroën, it is very hard to have the opportunity to even make spare parts, never mind make parts for testing or development or improve what you have. Peter Foulin out in the Seat Leon. So there's the first look at his livery. Very different from the livery that he runs in the European Touring Car Cup on his BMW, in which he is also racing this weekend, incidentally. So he is going to get more track time than anybody else. not necessarily going to help his car go any faster. It is a TC2 car, same as John Philippi in front of him. And those guys will be battling with the Engstler BMWs. So we got the two Engstler BMWs, Franz Engstler, Pasquale Di Sabatino, Peter Foulin, John Philippi in their Seat Leons. Those are the TC2 cars this weekend. Tom Coronel has recent, relatively good memories of this track. Had a shocking time in qualifying a couple of years ago, and then decided he wasn't even going to bother wasting any new tyres throughout the weekend. And with tyres that had done, I can't remember what he said, 2,000 kilometres or something ridiculous of just, you know, the set they stick on for endless testing and running, had a really good race in the BMW. Which just underlines that sometimes it's not what you've got, it's what you do with it that counts in racing.
Martin.
In the pits is Ben Edwards. Good morning, Ben.
Ben Constanduros. Not quite Ben Edwards. It's okay, though. That's a nice compliment.
No,
at least it's not Bob Constanduros.
No, that would be...
So I've been doing a little bit of a sweep of the pit lane to find out exactly what people have been gaining and what they've gained over the week. Obviously, that's these 2 days of testing. First and foremost, down at Lada, Kozlowski's engine changed again after their problems in Hungary. You'll remember that he had a pipe go in qualifying, burst a pipe, therefore overheated the engine. The engine was permanently damaged throughout the weekend, and I'm told by the PR guys that they've had to change the engine on that car. So that will mean he'll get a grid drop for the races in qualifying, but we'll have to wait and see if that comes to fruition. They reckon they found about a second in testing in Hungary from where they started the weekend to the end of testing. They can't be sure because no one had new tyres, of course, to go testing with. They were all using old tyres, but losing telemetry and clever stuff, they've worked out about a second found. Doing radical setup changes, things that they didn't think would work, and just try completely random caster and camber settings, and some of them working, some of them don't. But they reckon they found a second. Tom Chilton told us yesterday he reckons he's found about 0.7 of a second in his Chevrolet. He was the only Chevrolet to be testing, interestingly. So he really has stolen a little bit of a march on the rest of them and should be the fastest here, although he does admit that the Szlovákiaring is a little bit of a bogey circuit for him. And I then spoke to Andrea Adamo down at Honda. All four Hondas were testing at least 1 day. The works team did 2 days, but Bonani and Miklis did 1. Couldn't tell me exactly how much they'd found, but didn't fit any new parts of the car. That was the important thing. He hadn't developed any parts. It was simply more understanding of how the car works and what setup changes affect the car. These cars much more fragile now than they used to be and much more sensitive to setup changes. Obviously, the old spec cars, quite lazy and quite softly sprung. The more downforce, the fact that they run lower, and the fact that suspension is a lot harder, all makes that setup changes a lot more take effect. So they were learning basically how that all works down at Honda. Don't know how much they found, but Adamo tells me that he reckons they are in the hunt for qualifying, because Citroën, he doesn't feel, have really moved forward since the last race. So that was sort of a sweep of the pit lane so far. I'm now going to go and have a look and nose around and see what sort of setup changes are going on at the start of the session.
Well, that's very good, and I think you're probably right that these cars are now starting to, and they were saying that even actually after a couple of days of pre-season testing, that changes that you make to a wing used to be, the rear wing used to be fairly cosmetic. Now you can actually feel the difference, and so there is a little bit more of a feel of a single-seater change in the setup. The aerodynamics, you can see the great big splitter on the front, the aerodynamics with the splitter at the front and the new aero package and the wings actually having an effect. You can see how much different they look, how much more aggressive they look compared to, for instance, the old Seat Leon behind. In front there, you can see barely no wing, whereas when you look at the Chevy Vugo Valente, it's very clearly there. We just saw a little run-off wide from Gianni Morbidelli, from Rennie Munich, rather. Gianni Morbidelli, very, very excited with his weekend last weekend. I think probably, well, he said afterwards, those of you who have seen the Inside World Touring Cars program during the week, So definitely we were punching above our weights there. But in fairness, the RML Chevrolet may be short on development. I don't think it's short on potential. And so any chance that anybody gets to test this car is definitely going to be rewarded. One of Tom Chilton's problems yesterday, he said, was that the side window popped out of the car. Now, these are not glass on a winder like they would be in your own road car. They are just a Perspex panel or a Lexan panel, a bulletproof panel, which is not to stop bullets, but just to be safe. That is just fixed into the aperture just to tidy up the airflow, basically. And it's like that thing when you're going down the motorway with the window open, it was making an appalling noise. It popped out. I think it landed on Rob Huff's larder as he was following closely. But anyway, the team said, right, sorry about that, we haven't got any spares. Luckily, somebody out on the track did bring the window back. So it is now nailed in a little bit more firmly, you would hope. Certainly no use of gaffer tape. They're a bit more professional than that. But losing that, he reckoned, would possibly be worth or detrimental to the effect of about half a second. And it's a sort of weird art, airflow, because you think, well, okay, it's nice and smooth down the side of the car. That's a good thing for airflow, which is exactly right. But how much difference can a hole make? Why would a hole where the window should be make a difference? Well, the air tumbles into the gap and then cavitates around. It breaks the laminar airflow. It takes away laminar flow, which has been carefully directed around the car towards the rear wing as much as it can be. And so the rear wing starts to lose flow. So you have more drag from the turbulent air being sucked into the car by the gap, and then you have less rear wing as well.
I did like the story that he was telling of, we'll have to ask Matt Neal when he gets here a bit later on, about the fact that if you wind down the windows a little bit in the Super Touring era, they actually gave you downforce because just that small gap allowed a little bit of air through, and that pushed the rear end of the car down. Too much, of course, would have stalled the whole car and filled the cockpit full of air, but just enough. I don't know exactly the science, but just added a little bit of downforce to rear and a bit more stability, acting effectively like another rear wing.
Yeah.
So I don't see anyone running their windows down at the moment in the World Touring Car paddock, but potentially something that might work in the future. Well,
that is something, obviously, that you will find out in a wind tunnel, and clever engineers will know little tricks like that. And it's obviously something to do with high-pressure areas and low-pressure areas around the car. If it is in a low-pressure area, if the airflow is coming, let's imagine it's a front window, the air comes around the windscreen and doesn't immediately turn a sharp corner down the side of the car, so it sort of bends out and then moves down along the rear window, so there'll be a natural low-pressure area around the front windows, and maybe just by dropping that and bringing some of the air in from the low-pressure area, it actually encourages the airflow to follow the car more closely and therefore be more attached to the car as it gets towards the rear wing. I don't know. I'm not an aerodynamicist, as anybody who is and is now currently tearing their hair out and grinding their teeth can probably imagine. So hello to all Formula One aerodynamicists who are not in at the track or in a wind tunnel and are just going, oh, you fool. Jose Maria Lopez still the fastest man. Ivan Muller, third quickest. Lopez time, 2 minutes 5.8. Muller 2:06.3. Norbert Mikulits second fastest. For those of you that aren't familiar with World Touring cars, let's run down the timing tower. Lopez, Mikulits, Muller, Ivan Muller. Sebastian Loeb fourth. Gabriele Tarquini, Mehdi Banani fifth and sixth in their Hondas. So 3 Hondas, 3 Citroens in the top half dozen. Top Chevrolet is Hugo Vallant. That's 7th place, ahead of Tom Coronel, another Chevy. Thiago Monteiro, 9th in his factory Honda, and 10th is Dusan Borkovic, the Serbian driver. Again, not too far from home for he or Mikulits here. And we should see lots of Norby fans. The balmy army of Norby fans will be here in force. It's only a couple of hours from Budapest. Cheaper, actually, to get in here than it is in Budapest. So that works very nicely for them. Just outside the 10, René Munich in 11th, Rob Huff in 12th, Mikhail Kozlowski 13th. So that new engine is going to cost him basically any chance of qualifying. Well, it won't cost him a chance of qualifying well, but it'll cost him a chance of starting well, because he'll be binned effectively to the very back of the grid. Little French roundel there, the red, white and blue, which you used to see on, still do see on French aircraft, military aircraft. Red on the outside, blue on the inside, whereas of course the same colours for the Royal Air Force, ring of blue on the outside and concentric white and then a red centre. Well, Tom Chilton, for all the time he thinks he's found, hasn't actually produced anything yet. He's been out and in and out and in. Maybe they are still fixing the window back in.
Yeah, Martin, I'm up at Royal Motorsport, and they had Tom in the pits and fiddling around with something at the rear end, which I suspect was tweaking the rear suspension. But they've done it twice now, so they're obviously trying different setups without actually putting out a full lap. His window is in, by the way, so that's good.
We saw that.
Yeah, so interesting that he hasn't actually gone and set a full lap time yet, because I was wondering where he was, and obviously Hugo Vallant is at the moment the fastest Chevrolet, but he was definitely bigging himself up quite a lot, as we see one of the Hondas running a little bit deep into turn 2. Tricky braking zone there, especially now the cars are going well over the hill and then down the other side before they're hitting the brakes.
And that's the other thing. I mean, and Tom Coronel's just gone off wide there as well, just to indicate exactly that. In fact, he's rattled through the gravel traps as well in Rennie Munich territory. Ooh, and that's why, because he outbraked himself. And, you know, you look at that little onboard shot and you wonder, was there turbulence there from the car behind, in front rather, that then affected him under braking? Or did he just carry too much speed? Because, I mean, that's what free practice is about. You know, it's about getting the car set up, but it's also about working out how these cars work on this track, because nobody's raced them here yet. They've raced here, but very different cars. And as Ivan Muller has been saying for the last couple of race weekends, it is really starting to dawn on him that what these cars do compared to what last year's cars do not tie up. What you used to do and what you now have to do are very different things. Dusan Borkovic heading back down towards Ben and Alex. Mehdi Banani out on track. There's Banani, 6th fastest at the moment. This is a quicker lap than he's produced so far.
One of the other stories of this track is just how long the tyres will last. We always talked last year about, oh, it's going to be tricky on the tyres, and the compound, although hasn't changed, the construction of these tyres, obviously bigger wheels at 18 inches, the construction of the whole thing has had to change because of that. They are slightly stiffer on the sidewalls and flatter on the top, but the problem still remains. This is a very abrasive circuit. You're always turning, you're always leaning on one of the tyres, and therefore massive concern about how they can make these tyres last for the full duration of the race, which is going to be 60 kilometres, as it was 50 kilometres last year. And so, without warm-up, which is exactly where you would normally do that test, you'd normally do your 15 minutes, you stay out the whole way through and check to see if the car will last through the tyres. You don't have that now. So this session and free practice 2 is the only chance you have to see whether the tyres will last. No one is using new tyres, everyone running on an old set of tyres, the same set of tyres, no one really changing tyres, just to see if the times will drop dramatically. I haven't been really following the timing screens, but Lopez's 2:05.8 is 6 tenths of a second slower than he did yesterday.
Yeah, times aren't... if the track is rubbering up, then it's not making a significant difference. Obviously what we will see when we get into qualifying is the tyre will produce at least another second on a lap this long, maybe another 2 seconds, or certainly a second and a half, you would think, plus taking a fuel load out and all the other bits and bobs. And again, we may see Lopez doing that towards the end of FP2. I think we ought to petition Jose Maria Lopez just to go out at every free practice 2 and do one new tyre run, just so that we've all got an idea of where it is we're going to go, and we look a lot more clever when we go global live in qualifying, predicting where the qualifying time might be. Tom Chilton, oh look, he's actually completing a flying lap now. He has done 5 laps. None of them actually have been complete laps that didn't involve the use of the pit lane, and he eschews the pit lane this time, going for the full flyer, Ben. This is exciting times. Was I over-egging now? I think so, possibly. A lot of cars in the pit lane at the moment. And incidentally, Peter Foulin just popped up into 15th place. It's being shuffled back down the order again as Rennie Munich and Gianni Morbidelli have gone quicker. But Foulin at the moment, the fastest of the TC2 cars. The current generation, the new cars, the big fat arches, the 1980s AMG style flares on them, Those are TC1 cars now, and the cars that we raced up until the end of last season are now called TC2.
One thing that's changed at the Szlovákiaring from last year is over the curbs, they've now put new tarmac areas, and I think this is going to cause a bit of a problem for Mirek and the race control team, because there are certain places where they've placed tyres to stop the cars doing all four wheels off, but in other areas we can still very much see, especially through turn one, the cars are able to run over the curb and their inside tyres brushing the curb while their outside tyres well off the circuit. And of course, if you can make the corner a little straighter, you can take more speed in and therefore, in theory, get a faster lap time. So that is going to be an interesting one for Mirek and the race control team to try and manage and govern, because where the tyres are on the outside of corners to stop them, okay, you're not going to run four wheels off. Oh, Hugo getting a big slide on there. But in other places, you can go all four wheels off. That's off the circuit, and in British touring cars anyway, and British racing, that would be very much lap disallowed. We haven't seen any lap disallowed so far, but potentially as the race weekend goes on and after a few drivers complain, you can see just on the outside there that we might see a little problem occurring with these big tarmac runoff areas. No grass, it used to be grasscrete and therefore that would be slippery. That's tarmac, it's exactly the same as what's on track, so you might as well use it.
Well, the only problem is if they're not penalising them now in free practice, then that is setting a precedent. So Hugo Vallon having a little slide wide. There's sparks coming up there, I think there might have been. Now that's what we need. We need titanium skids on the bottom of the splitters so that when they bottom out over bumps, we can go, that would be very groovy. And not at all uncost effective. Trying to reduce the cost, yes, let's have titanium skid plates. Titanium, nice and cheap. Vallon again hanging on through that long right-handed corner. That is a real tyre killer, that corner. It is, as Ben says, going to be very punishing on tyres, especially through the race. The only thing is, you know, we've heard for years and years and years, especially in the glory days of the Seat Diesel, how the tyres were going to be gone after 3 laps, the brake discs will be exploding after 3 laps. Nobody ever ran out of tyres apart from at the Salzburg ring, and that was an entirely Seat Diesel related event. That was all about camber and tyre wear and tyre temperatures on an extremely hot day. And we have found that extreme parameter, and everybody's backed away a little bit from that, and so that won't happen. And the simple deal is, like Vettel in Monaco, it doesn't matter how shredded the tyres are, if you're in the race, you stay on them and you just get on with it. In free practice, of course, you wouldn't put up with any of that old nonsense. You complain bitterly, but in the race, you're racing. It doesn't matter what you've got. And if your tyres are crackered, it means that everybody else's are as well. So the drop-off is pretty much the same for everybody.
Yeah, you've got to remember, though, that running out of tyres from our perspective, watching it, and running out of tyres from the driver's perspective is two very different things. Of course, if you're sitting behind the wheel and you don't have as much grip every lap as you did before, you're going to say you're running out of tyres, whereas we don't see it other than a small drop in lap time per lap, you know, 2/10 here, 2/10 there. We don't think it's happening, but the drivers definitely feel it. And of course, if you can manage the tyre pressures and manage the wear early on in the race, by the end of the race, you could have better tyres than the rest, and therefore you could have more speed than the rest at the end of the race. So that is, I suppose, a challenge. We don't see them losing tyres, and they certainly don't pop, well, most of the time, but they are actually giving up grip as each race goes on.
Hugo Vallon has succeeded, Ben, as you will notice if you find the screen. He has been testing limits of adhesion everywhere, and he has finally managed to exceed them, and has gone into a gravel trap and has not made it safely outside the hazard on the far end. So he's now got stuck. So that effectively is the end of his free practice session down at turn 10. I take on board exactly what you're saying about tyre wear. But you know, we have had tales of woe. We'll be back in the pits after 3 laps. They'll be undrivable. They were never undrivable because everybody else had tyre wear as well. And so the basic level of performance of all the cars sort of comes down at pretty much the same speed. However, you're right. If you are in a battle early on, then you're going to be asking more of your tyres than somebody who is either A, just ahead, or B, just behind, and you may therefore have more tyre left. James Thompson just goes by, I'm assuming that was teammate Rob Huff. It was teammate Rob Huff, in fact. That was a good guess. Normally when there's a 50-50 call, I thought Kozlowski was still in the pits, and in fact he is still in the pits now. I checked the monitors. So Huff is off at the side of the track. So maybe the unreliability gremlin is with Rob Huff's car this weekend. Having said that, of course, you know what that does. Somebody did suggest to me during the week that James Thompson ought to have the skull and crossbones on the top of his car rather than the Union flag, due to his resemblance to a certain Disney film pirate. I did actually mean to bring a Captain Jack Sparrow pirate hat with me this weekend. He'd like a pull. So it's not run out of brakes, is what we're saying. Red flags. And that is because Rob Huff is going to need towing out of the way. And in fact, now that Miroslav Bartos, our race director, has thrown the red, this pickup could essentially tow Huffy all the way back to the pits, which would be helpful for him, helpful for the Lada team, and not particularly a disappointment for anybody else.
Except for the fact that surely with just a minute and a bit left, we are going to end the session.
Well, in which case he can definitely tow him back to the pits.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, onboard shows Rob Huff just grinding slowly to a halt. And sticking it into neutral and rattling things around. And the total silence there says, probably not that a rod has gone through the block or a turbo has blown or anything else. Generally, as when you see most cars parked on the side of a motorway somewhere, it's electronics. Unless there are bits missing. Oh, careful with that tow rope. Oh, the tow rope has not gone slack. The tow rope has come unattached from the car. Hugo Vallon's car has been lifted and laid. That's a good Ulster phrase, taught to me by long-time colleague Mark Gallagher from Jordan, Cosworth and All Points West. It's not even remotely as naughty as it sounds. Just means picked up and dropped off. Jose Maria Lopez gets out of the car. Pachito, the fastest man. Do we remember what Pachito means, his nickname? Suggests to me that it should be Little Fisherman. I'm not quite sure if that works. I don't. Pêche is fish in French, isn't it? Not Spanish.
Now, hopefully, there are many people out in Twitter world that can tell us.
Yeah, unfortunately, the again, our customary lack of Wi-Fi.
Ah, that's where I benefit. So anyone who wants to talk to me, at Ben Constanduros then, because mine's working. And we have an interview. Alex is down there, so let's catch up with Mr. Lopez. Maybe she can ask.
Yeah, Jose Maria Lopez, fastest man on track during free practice 1. Well done, you. What are you finding out there?
I really enjoyed this track, to be honest. A little bit as Hungary, I'm a bit surprised on the laps I've been doing, especially the first laps. Still knowing the circuit, making some reference, so it's very important to me to be in the front. I know still I can still improve, but also the fact that you know, we are 3 on the team, we can work together. So also for me, in the terms of setups, it makes me maybe not worry too much, because I can share with Ivan and Seb after the session to see what's the best for the car. And that obviously allows me to concentrate on make my marks and learn the track and everything. So I'm pretty happy. I didn't expect maybe to be P1 today in free practice 2-1. I was testing maybe more for racing, so I think it's a good beginning. But I did start good in Hungary, and Ivan beat me on the qualifying, so I think the most important thing is that.
Well, that's good news from Jose Maria Lopez, still sharing data with his teammates. Wonder how long that's going to carry on if he continues leading the championship and pulling away. Norbert Mikulec second quickest, just 2 tenths behind Ivan Muller and Sebastian Loeb third and fourth in their Citroens.